Hello. Have you ever been called that parent? Or have you called another parent that parent? And as like many things in our world, right? A phrase, a word can mean so many different things to different people. So sometimes I've been called that parent by teachers, and I was a teacher. But sometimes that parent means we're kind of a pain in the butt because the teachers might see us as never satisfied, always asking for more, pushing for more training or whatever. But there are other teachers, like I was, that loved parents that would speak up and that would want to be a partner. And then I also realize there are many parents that might not be able to live up to those, I don't know, white privilege expectations we have of what a parent should be, how a parent should advocate for their child. So if this is resonating with you, let us know in the comments. I want this to be very interactive. It's more of a discussion than like a formal, here's my PowerPoint. Um, but I really want to see what your thoughts are too. Um, because I see my thinking being pushed by wonderful friends, and I just feel like, there that we need to always be evolving with what we believe, because there's new things that make us go, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." So, what would you say is your definition of that parent? So, I'd love to see, let me see here where my mouse is. Um, so, start us off in the comments. Say hi, let us know what your definition of that parent is. Um, and a couple years ago, I wrote this post, and it like reappeared on my Facebook page the other day, just like in this automatic cycle. And I didn't realize it was coming back up. And it's like I cringed because it's like, ugh, that's really not what I think anymore. Um, I think basically that parent is a parent that loves their child and wants the best for them. And that's all you have to be as a parent. You don't have to be a researcher. You don't have to be an expert in the law. You don't have to know what needs to be in a prior written notice. Because what we've been doing for so long is we've been taking on that as parents. Oh, well, I know the school's not going to tell me this stuff, so I better research it. I better join this Facebook group and post a question. And we are always, that hamster on the wheel, like trying to find the newest information. And I think what we do is we allow the education system to sit back and do nothing. As far as a lot of times, I don't see school districts evolving, advancing, especially when it comes to seeing all students as competent and people that have things to contribute, and all of those values we have as parents. And so it's not that we need to learn more, it's that the system needs to learn more and the system needs to change. So we're going to have some provocative things to be talking about today. And Catherine, welcome. And Abby and Kim are here too. So, Catherine's saying that parent, the one who supports their child and advocates for them. Yes. And Abby says, hi, I think that parent is trying to get the best for their child. Yeah. And Kim, hey Kim, she says that parent is not afraid to ask questions. It's easy to be intimidated into not asking. And Angela agrees. And so let's look here kind of one at a time as far as a possible definition, or it's not like we have to agree, right? I mean, and I'll give you my thinking, and it's not meant to be like, oh, this is the gospel truth. This is just my thinking. So Kim says that parent is not afraid to ask questions. And so when I read that, I think back to a parent that I was helping that from their culture, it's not acceptable to question authority figures. So to say that the individual parent would have that label of that parent means that they have to ask questions. And for some parents, culturally, that's not going to work. So then when we think that we have to ask questions, and as an advocate, right? I'm one that loves asking questions. But when we put it that way, and I don't know, but it's like that parent is here. When you reach that level, you're asking questions at IEP meetings, and you are that parent, and you're not intimidated. You're going to ask your questions. And if you're an individual parent over here that your culture does not support questioning authority, does that mean that there's this disconnect, this distance, this inequity of, oh, well, and Kim, I'm not saying you said it like this, but this is just a common thing is like, oh, we have to be more confident, we have to ask more questions, we have to be more assertive, and it just leaves other parents out. And so and I had put this in my Facebook post, that's like, I feel like there's that parent club. And if we don't research, if we don't know what's in the prior written notice, if we don't ask questions, we're not in that parent club. We're over here. And I think it's one of those unintended consequences of that kind of thinking. So I don't know. What do you guys say? I wish you had microphones so I could hear you. Um, and so Abby says, I agree that I see that seeing parents do research and presenting best practices at school and saying, well, we did it we do it this way. Yeah. So Anne Marie, I don't know if you heard some of the discussion, but one of the things we were asking is, what's your definition of that parent? And just I guess what helps me is for me to stop and think about it. Because I mean, I had coffee mugs with that, hello, my name is that parent, and all kinds of things. And it's like anymore, it doesn't feel good to me. Because it does feel like we are separating parents out instead of being together. So let's look. Angela says that parent doesn't have to have a negative connotation. Exactly. And that's what I was trying to do a couple years ago when I wrote that post. Um, is I wanted to take back, like that negative connotation. And, sometimes we joke about it, we laugh about it. And that part, I understand that I don't want that parent to have a negative connotation. The part that is still like a rub to me is um, when some parents don't feel like they can rise to being that parent for a variety of reasons. And so that's, I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining it well enough, but I appreciate your comments. Thanks. And Brandy, yeah, Anne Marie says, we're all that parent. And Brandy says, don't we all have to ask questions regardless of societal views, regardless of culture or social beliefs? We have to think for ourselves to learn, right? Well, in our in our culture, yeah. I mean, that's part of our, I think, our, American culture is to think for ourselves and to learn, and that we can do this ourselves if we put in the effort. Um, but when you live in a different culture, that's that's not how people operate. Um, and so to expect people to say, well, this is the white American way, Anglo-Saxon, whatever, um, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel inclusive. Um, and so what I'm looking at, instead of us doing so much individual advocacy for our own kids, I want us to realize that there are a lot of parents, and again, for whatever reason, aren't going to be able to ask the questions, know the answers, whatever. Um, so instead of only advocating for our individual children, we need to be cognizant of, we need to be advocating for all the learners in our school, for all the families. And I don't mean to take on this like huge, oh my God, Charmaine, how can I do that? But what we have to do is we have to create system change, because when we only advocate for one kid at a time, it takes change for everyone doesn't happen, right? And that's where I'm using my privilege and my knowledge. And, when I was advocating for our son Dylan, and, you know, we filed for due process, we went at mediation, I knew all the things to do. And for a few years, the precedent that we established for our son was also given to other students in the district. But that was just for a few years. And as time went on, that precedent of preschoolers can be in community preschools and get support, that disappeared. So we have to be looking at, how can we make sustainable change in the school and the building and the district and the state and the country, all of that, right? So there's going to be different levels of advocacy. And some parents, it's like, it's enough for me to go to my kid's own IEP meeting. And I recognize that, and I get that. But there are so many others of us, like the other people with us today, that we can be pushing greater efforts forward. So let's see, we've had some great comments here, so I want to get them up. So Kim was saying, I guess I don't understand the question of define that parent. Yeah, to me, it was just like a question. Like, for some of us, we think that parent, is expert on IDEA. For some of us, we think, oh, that parent, they're the one that can go, look up any rule and regulation and explain it to you. So different people have different definitions, I think, of that parent. When you think of, if yourself, you've been called that parent, why do you think teachers called you that parent? Was it because sometimes teachers say, oh, the parent is too pushy when we're being assertive, right? So, yeah, it was just, I think it's interesting to see how people, see that phrase, that parent. Hey, Tamra, I'm so glad you're here. She said, coming from another culture, it took me 8 years of IEP meetings to ask questions. The parent support groups helped me tremendously and my desperation too. So thank you, Tamra. Yes, Tamra lives in Massachusetts now, but see, look at that, huh? So, yeah, and that's where parents are left to do so much by themselves. And Tamara's saying that different parent support groups made such a difference. But look at that curve of not feeling, whatever, comfortable, confident, whatever, to ask questions during a meeting. And the amount of time it takes for some parents to feel comfortable. So that's why we have to be looking at bigger change, because it's not just Tamara and her son, but think of how many other parents are in that situation. And if we only do individual advocacy, we don't really gain very much. It's sad but true. So Anne Marie, that parent never stopped learning about the IEP process. And so, what if there are parents that have disabled kids and they don't learn about the IEP process? So they're not that parent. There's something else. I don't know. So that's the thing. Our definition is helpful because it's like, so if people don't do that, does that mean they don't fit into this kind of elite club of people? And I just see it so much based on, like white privilege. So Abby says, I think even those parents who aren't asking questions and advocating hard, still want the best for their kids. As for those who are doing all those things to the fullest, we should be working for all kids. Thank you. Yes. So I think, Abby, you captured it better than I've been trying to talk about it. Yeah. So to me, that's, it's like, what's the entry level for our kids to be included? They're a human being. They're a student at that school. It's just like basic. They belong, right? So for parents, it's like you have a child, you love that child, you want the best for your child. That's all you need to do. And if you don't have the energy, the time, the motivation, the culture, whatever, to go further, there are thousands, millions of parents in this country that can help not only their child, but your child too. So it's more of a collaborative advocacy, instead of so much individual advocacy. And Karen, hey Karen, let's see. I know you'll say something wonderful. She says, okay, I'm a minority, but we must presume competency of parents you speak of. Just because they have a different way of doing things or speak another language or come from another culture doesn't mean that they can't rise to that parent levels. Maybe they haven't been given that opportunity or the freaking information. Maybe they've been ignored. and the lack of inclusion you speak of is real. It is damned unwelcoming at group meetings and PTA for other parents in the majority schools. So, yeah, thank you so much, Karen. Um, yeah, you speak the truth, right? Um, and so, one of the things that I think is helpful, and I was going to bring this up. Um, so one of the things that I think can be helpful when we're advocating is to say, is this an individual issue for my child, or is this a systemic issue? Now, so many parents I talk to as an advocate are, getting roadblock after roadblock trying to get their child included into general ed classes. But that's probably not just your child at that school, right? That's probably an issue with lots of kids at your child's school and even more kids in your school district. So, advocating for inclusion is not an individual issue, it's a systemic issue. In order to make real lasting change, we have to be working on systemic change. Now, if your child uses hearing aids and um, the teacher is, I don't know, something ridiculous, like taking away the hearing aids or something, I don't know. Um, I mean, that would be an individual issue, right? And so advocating for that, having that understanding, that would be something that would be individual advocacy. But we have such a need for larger collaborative advocacy. And I know Abby's working with a wonderful group of parents. Abby, you can let me know. I think like at least like 35, 45 people came to their first like district meeting with their new special ed director. So Abby's been doing great things in Kentucky in her school district. And I'm sure a lot of you are also working on bigger areas. So, if there's some things that you've been working on for more systemic issues, let us know because I think that would be fun for us to get to know. More ideas. So, Brandy says schools look at us parents like we don't know anything, but we know our kids and how they do best. If they work with us instead of against us, it would be better all around. Parents are willing to advocate for the schools too, if they were open to informing us of what they need and how we can help. I always think of how it helps my child and other children after him. But the parents who focus only on their child only make change for other children too. It's okay to do that if that's all you can do. Yeah, thanks, Brandy, because I think you bring up a really important point that if we could be working more collaboratively with school staff and as parents, but also, gathering other allies like community members and things like that, and really look at some things that can change in the district that will impact so many kids. Like, if the district decided to fully implement universal design for learning, I mean, that would help every single kid in every single school building in your district. I mean, that would be huge. That would make like enormous impact on the type of education that all our kids get. Um, so if we could find those issues and those common, concerns between teachers and parents, because there's a lot of teachers out there that are cheering you on and maybe not doing it publicly, but there are a lot of teachers that agree that we need to make some major changes in our education system. So we need to bring along those teachers, and we need to bring along parents that don't have kids with disabilities, because what we want to talk about is something that's going to help everyone, not just kids with IEPs or 504 plans. We're looking at all kids. So yeah, working together more and finding, even if it's just one or two teachers that you can find in your building that are open to looking at change, start connecting with them, start building those relationships, because it makes a huge difference. So let's see, let me take this down. Sorry. And Catherine says, I'm wanting to join a community to help make change. Admittedly, I have been flying solo for the most part. Yes, Catherine. And it does really help. I mean, if you're looking at systemic change, right, don't want to be working in isolation. We have a membership group now that, that's one of the things that we encourage parents to do also. And people like Abby, who's one of our members and has started making some big change in her school district. So yeah, it's invigorating to be with others that want to make that change too. So I'm glad you're here, Catherine. And Linda says, as you mentioned, there are systemic changes needed. The system is not designed at present to provide equality and equity. It's driven by economics, resources, etc. at the end of the day. Yeah, and that's kind of like that roadblock that we hit a lot. And it's like, how much time and effort, and I keep pulling that up, how much time and effort are we taking to try to fix this broken system, versus, I don't know, how do we dismantle it and start anew? Yeah, there are lots of big questions, right? It's like, oh my gosh, how can we do this? Oh, yeah. So here's Abby. She said, yes, systemic change is definitely the way to go. We have a third meeting on Monday. You go, girl. Karen says the systemic issue is the school administration and parent leaders do not want the parents of special needs 504 kids to organize or talk or get together. They say it's a privacy issues. I wasn't allowed to have the roster in my child's special ed classes, only as general ed classes. It's a system of segregation. Yeah, exactly. And a system of segregation, I mean, you can't like just put band-aids on it, and only the vocal parents are the ones that get things changed for their child, right? So thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think that's really true. Kim says, I'd like to join your private Facebook group that was discussed at the peer professional training. Can you please touch on that at some point? I'm not sure how to join. Yeah, I can get back with you, Kim, and give you the link. I don't think I have the link here. But yeah, I'll get back with you. So thank you for all these great comments. And Brandy says America would have to prioritize education better. This would mean allocating appropriate funding, support, resources, and ensuring training and teacher pay. Teachers are overworked and very undersupported and paid. There are so many staffing issues because of that. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's such, like this domino um, kind of a domino light where, the light flashes on one aspect of our education system, but then that has this domino light of, yeah, but look at all these other things that we need to spotlight and we need to look at and we need to change. Um, so it is, sometimes it can just feel so overwhelming. But other times when we're taking action and working together, there's this momentum and there's this cheering on and yes, 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 we can do this. And that is like really important because otherwise we burn out and, we kind of fall to the side and wait for somebody else to come along. Um, so yes. And Linda says there are a lot of teachers that agree, but many fear speaking up in the IEP table and or are told not to. Yeah. And that's where I said sometimes there's teachers that are maybe not publicly, but they're silently cheering you on. Um, and so if there's a culture in the building for teachers not to disagree with each other or this is the party line of what we say at IEP meetings, that unspoken kind of rule is something that needs to be put on the table and talked about, because that's not okay, right? And my dog's coming in here to visit me. I see you. Stop. He's licking me. Stop licking me. He wants to be part of the show. Abby says, it breaks my heart thinking of all the kids that don't have someone advocating for them. And I mean, no disrespect to their parents. So I work hard to help everyone I can through systemic change. Yes. And you're doing a terrific job at that, Abby. And yeah, and that's what we just need to keep doing, right? Um, And Brandy says, so true. I've had teachers after retirement tell me they wanted to help so badly, but weren't allowed to. Now I try to assume teachers want to help and ask them what we can do to get this going. Yeah, I think, and I love how you had said earlier, like what we can do to support the teachers, right? And so we stop having that us against them kind of mentality, but it's like, what can we do together to make change and to support staff? And that goes a long way, right? When the teachers see that we're not just advocating for our kid to get something, but we're really trying to support them and change the education system. Um, so yes, so this was another thought I had, was that we need to see that shift because it's not the parents that have to become better. It's up to the system to change. And so that's where we want to make sure our efforts are, right. Um, so let's look at some more. Thanks for engaging in the conversation. It's so nice. Um, and Anne Marie said, it's unfortunate that many state PTIs are fluff, and she means the parent training and information centers. And the U.S. Department of Ed just gave some more funding for the parent training and information centers. Every state has at least one. Other states like Texas, California, where the population is more, they have more than one PTI. But hopefully your PTI does have resources that they can share and, trainings that they can do. And they can start doing even more now that they're getting more money, right? Karen said, yes, our parents created a Facebook and meetup group in order to get together. Now we have added SPED and 504 parents and the PTA leadership and the school district board. Wow. It took about 7 years of organization and nonstop advocating. Well, congratulations, Karen, and I'm so glad you guys stuck with that, because, yeah, that makes a big difference. And a lot of times I have talked about, I'm really not that much of a proponent of a segregated parent group, of parents only of kids with disabilities, because I think that reinforces that we're this special interest group instead of we're all in this together. But when we are active on our local PTA, when we are, you know, a school board member or attend school board meetings, all of those kinds of things can be really helpful. And I also think there's a time and place for more of, what's called like an affinity group. So there are times like, we have our local Down syndrome group where we have like monthly moms nights out. So there are times that you want to just connect with other families, that are going through similar kinds of things. But on the whole, I think we will create larger change when we're part of the regular PTO, when we're involved in school activities that may not necessarily have to do with special ed, but just supporting school activities. Um, so yeah, I think all of that is really helpful. And Trisha, hey, Trisha's from Idaho. She said our best special ed teacher was fired for advocating for my 3 children. Yeah, and and that gets into like a whole nother thing. I mean, when I was a teacher, I was always a member of the National Education Association, and then you have state and local associations. And one of the things that, I think kept me for having my job and still having good evaluations after we filed for due process is they knew I would, file some kind of a complaint for retaliation. Um, and so that's another aspect for teachers, right? It's like, depending on what you think about unions, for me, I saw the National Education Association as something that was really important because I could do a lot of speaking out and I could still have my job. But that's not true in all districts. So yeah, that's so sad, Trisha. Yeah. I mean, wow, when you think of that, I don't know. Um, Karen says it is very sad. Segregation didn't end in the 1960s. Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the problem, right? Is it just continues, and um, having that whole continuum of services, somebody's always going to be at either end of the continuum. Um, And so, as long as we have that continuum, I think that just perpetuates segregation of kids. But that could be a whole nother video, right? Um, let's see. Linda says IDEA is only funded at 15%, not the 40% commitment. The economics do impact school districts. Yes. Yes, for sure. And that's been a huge thing ever since, um, the first law was passed, is that it's never been fully funded at that, commitment of we'll fund 40%. Yeah. And what we're seeing is districts are having to be more creative. In a way, this can be a good time because school districts have, in the past few years, gotten additional funding. Um, and one of the questions you could ask is, how is that additional funding from, COVID, the impact of COVID, how has that been spent in our district? So yeah, and it's hard, and it's really hard for rural districts, right? One, to have enough applicants to fill teaching positions and, OT, PT positions. So yeah, it's a complex problem. I mean, it's not like go to your school board meetings and everything's going to be solved. It's taking decades of work, and the sooner we start doing more collaborative advocacy, the sooner we'll see some bigger changes happening. There's more work to do. And Karen says, yes, today they take away funding and hope it will die on the vine. Yeah, I mean, and that's like a whole nother thing too, right? With what we're seeing in school boards around the country, um, and almost this dismantling of public education, which is really impactful for so many families. So yeah, there's huge things. And Linda says, again, systemic change are needed in adhering to the IEP process, as well as changes at the federal and state levels with regard to funding. Yeah, and that's why, you can look at where you feel most comfortable. If it's, advocating at an individual level, that's what you do, and that's perfect, for you. If you feel like, it just really bugs me what I see happening in the district, and you want to volunteer to be on some kind of a, district-wide committee or task force, that's what you can do. If there isn't a group that you want to see getting together and meeting, you can form that group. You can look at state level advocacy. You can look at federal level advocacy. So there's a variety of opportunities, and depending on what you feel attracted to, that's what you can do. For and all of our efforts together, it's really making a change, right? um Cindy, hey Cindy is in Pennsylvania. um she says, oh, Anne, is that your experience? I'm upset to hear that. Oh, as far as PTIs being fluff, um she said the Peel Center in Pennsylvania is pretty robust, and our individual assistants and trainings are the busiest we've ever seen. Huh. Well, yes, and the Peel Center, they do an enormous job in Pennsylvania for families there. And I would suggest that you go to their website, if you want to put it in here, Cindy, um, and check out some of the trainings and, that they offer. You'll find a lot of support from the Peel Center in Pennsylvania. And I worked for the Peak Parent Center in Colorado, so I always have wonderful things to say about Peak Parent Center and the work that we did, and that the work that they are continuing to do. So, yeah, I would encourage people to check into their PTI, their Parent Training and Information Center, and get on their email. And if they're not providing what parents want, then that's a place you can do advocacy and say, we really need this kind of training, or we really need these kind of resources. So yeah, if it's not what you need, talk to them about it, right? And Anne-Marie says, here's some info if anyone wants to learn more about the state advisory councils panels. Please check out IDEA, or Ideas That Work. Yeah, and I think you are on the South Carolina one, right? The State Advisory Committee. And that can be another role where you get your voice heard at the state level, which can be really helpful. And Linda says, if a district has a shortage of resources such as SLPs, et cetera, who are often contracted, the district recognizes that, and as such, is not going to offer services, for example, unless parents know how to navigate the IEP process to legally make it necessary for them to do so. Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, Linda. So thanks for bringing that up. And I think it goes back to, what we were talking about at the beginning, where it's the district that has a responsibility to inform parents. So if parents aren't getting the information, if they're only getting handed that copy of the procedural safeguard rights and no one's really verbally going through it with them, those are district issues that can be resolved. And so then we need to be asking the district, so how are you letting parents know if their child really needs related services, but the district doesn't have the staff to provide them? How are you explaining that to parents? Because um, that's where the onus is. It's on that district. And, I think, I don't know, one of the things that parents could do is, when they're offered the procedural safeguards at the beginning of every meeting, say, I've gotten these for years, but no one's ever really gone through it. And let's take the time to do that. And I mean, that would take a lot of your IEP meeting time. So, you can do it that way, or you can say, before we have the meeting, I want to sit down with the special ed teacher and the special ed director and the principal, and I want these procedural rights explained to me. Because that's their responsibility. And usually the last page of your procedural safeguard rights or the last page of your prior written notice will say, these are some organizations that you can go to get more clarification. But I think it starts with the district. I want to see how a special ed teacher explains it. And I want to see if the special ed director agrees with that explanation. And I want the principal to have some aha moments of like, ooh, I didn't even realize that. So I don't know if anybody wants to. I always had this kind of dream. So I'll put the idea out there because maybe somebody else will do it. Is to, the Michael Giangreco cartoons that they're just like so wonderful. I thought if we could have Michael Giangreco cartoons explaining procedural safeguard rights, and not that like, oh, we have to dumb it down and make them cartoons, but no, it's like he is so poignant with, sending a message. But anyway, I think we do. And if anybody has in their district or state, let me know. Do you have like a more parent friendly explanation of their rights? Because sometimes it's so legalese that it's like, who wants to open this up and read it? So that's a sidebar. Do you know any good parent-friendly explanations of procedural safeguards? um, and um, so yes, and Anne says yes. They really aren't set up for supporting inclusion. Our state is failing in implementing the premise of IDEA. Yeah, and sometimes those state committees can feel like you're spending a lot of time, which feels like token input instead of really making change. But there are state advisory committees that are out there, like doing the legwork and changing things up. So hopefully that will be yours. Um, no, she's in South Carolina. Yeah. Oh, good. She said her daughter was born. In Pittsburgh. My husband and I went to school in Pittsburgh. So, yes, www.peelcenter.org. Yes, yes, yes. Karen says, thank you for the convo. Gotta go. You all have a great day. Keep your heads up. Thank you. And Tamara says, thank you, Anne Marie. In our state, only OSEP listens to our stories. But that's, yeah, thanks for submitting that link too, Tamara, so people can click there. Yeah. Brandy says they don't explain that to parents because it's illegal for schools to deny services to funding or staffing. So districts won't openly communicate that with parents, unfortunately. Yeah, and that's where it's like, so who's being honest? I mean, it's like, I don't know. I feel like I have this can of worms here that reminds myself of, we're opening another can of worms here. Um, and so how do we keep people accountable for being honest? And I, I don't know. I guess I'm, the kind of person that lays it on the table. And, if I knew that was happening in our district, even if it wasn't my kid, I think somebody needs to speak out against that. Because, yeah, I mean, that's not right. And yes, we know, and that's why I'm an advocate and I do lots of trainings for families. But it's the district. That's kind of like where the buck stops, right? So I don't know. Oh yes, and the patent. This resource, and you don't have to live in Pennsylvania to go there. This has a lot of resources. And Cindy, what's the name of the family? The Gaskin case, that in part of the settlement, and Cindy, you can explain it better. But they have this statewide resource center now, and it has lots of great information. And the state of Texas, their Department of Ed, they have a lot of great resources. So look in your state resources. What I find is there's wonderful creative people at the State Department sometimes writing these wonderful resources, but they don't trickle down and they don't get implemented in districts. But if you can go to your State Department's website and find some great resources or trainings, and then say, hey, how come our district isn't doing this? Or what about our district participating in this? So yeah, I mean, it's use the resources that are in your state and then say, how can we work together to get this implemented? Yes. So Brandy says, also asking for things being explained is all good and well, but to give an example, I moved here to North Carolina and they took away my son's 67% inclusion time because they put him on an extended track. I kept explaining that I did not understand what that was, and they were agitated because they felt they spent ample time trying to explain it. They did it anyways, even though I said I was not informed. Yeah. And I mean, I live in the reality of IEP meetings because that's how I spend a lot of my time as an advocate, is either virtually or now in person IEP meetings. And I know that happens. And it's not like, oh, where's my magic wand? It's not like I'm going to use my magic wand and create something totally different. But it is something for us to think about. And, I don't know. I think we just have to call people on things. And if it doesn't work at the IEP table, we go up to the director, the assistant superintendent of instruction, or the superintendent, the school board, state complaints, all of those different things. But it's like we have to call people out on things that are, not following what's supposed to be happening. I don't know if I want to use the word dishonest or what, but we need to call people out and then try to build that relationship back up. Okay, and Cindy, so I haven't looked at this one. So this is a link to parent rights. And so this one might be good for you guys to look up and see if it gives a good explanation. Yes, there's so many cans of worms. There are. She said, I would love to know who has successfully advocated for universal design and how they made it happen. Yeah, more examples like that would be great. Brandy, I don't know if you know Katie Novak. She does a lot of work around universal design for learning. So does Paula Cluth. And they've either consulted or worked with school districts around that. So that might be one way, you could contact them. Or anybody here, if your school or your district is using UDL, Universal Design for Learning, let us know, because that's kind of my dream. I used to have a Facebook group called Universal Design for Inclusion, because to me, if we could get UDL implemented with fidelity, we wouldn't have to have all these meetings talking about inclusion for our kids. Because with Universal Design for Learning, their needs, their strengths would be addressed in the classroom, right? So, Cindy, we're glad you're here today. You're giving us lots of good stuff. Yes, she said with the Gaskin settlement agreement, when it expired, lots of things put in place then have faded away. Some things have stayed, like the Supplemental Aids and Services Toolkit. So there's another link that you might want to do. Yeah, and see, that's, let me get a drink of water here. If people saw my interview with Michael McSheehan, and he was one of the co-founders of the Swift Center, has had different grants from New Hampshire, the State Department in New Hampshire, for different initiatives. And, what Michael was saying is once that funding runs out, it just flatlines. And did you hear? Such sad news. The Ties Center did not get refunded for another 5 years of the fabulous work that they do. So I'm really, really disappointed, because if you haven't been to the Ties Center, their website, they have such rich, valuable resources about including kids, and their focus was students that have significant cognitive disabilities, but it's for anyone, right? I mean, the strategies. So I'm really, really bummed that the Tie Center won't be federally funded by OSEP. I know they are looking for other partners. So one of the things I was going to suggest was that they look at maybe partnering with parent training and information centers, since the PTIs are getting additional funding. That would be pretty cool. Cindy, you might want to see if the Peel Center wants to partner with the people that worked at the Ties Center for a project. Wouldn't that be cool? So, yeah, and I can put an email address if you guys have ideas on how we can keep that momentum going from the resources that the Thai Center developed. And not only were they, developing resources, but they were also working with schools. So, it's that boots on the ground kind of thing that makes the huge difference. So I know Idaho just put in a lot of extra money for K through 12 education. So I was thinking, I wonder if we can do something here in Idaho. I don't know. And I'll put that in my newsletter. So if you don't get my weekly newsletter, usually comes out on Tuesday mornings. You can sign up here for iep.today/weekly adv tips. And I'll be putting the links that Cindy shared with us in the newsletter, and then also, where you can get in touch with some of the staff from the Thai Center if you have ideas or you would like them to partner with a group in your state or in your region. I mean, there's lots of possibilities. So I'll make sure that I give you that stuff. Yeah, Amy says, what? I can't believe the Thai Center devastating. I knew they were rewriting, but hadn't heard the news. Yeah, because I wrote a letter of support for them, and I just got an email last night that their funding didn't get, they weren't funded for another 5 years. Good. Cindy says she'll let their executive director know. Yes, yes, yes. I know. Angela, can you believe it? She says, no, not the Thai Center. They are the best. I know. Devastating, but yeah. And Anne says, when I looked at UDL college courses, it's only geared towards special ed, zero information for general ed teachers. Yeah, and that depends on the college, right? I know in Idaho, we have some universities that have special ed professors that know a lot about UDL, but they're also spreading that word to teachers that are looking at being a general ed teacher versus a special ed teacher. So that brings up another can of worms, right? Is what our higher ed programs are teaching teachers and how that translates. Let's see. And Tamara says, thank you so much, Charmaine. You're so awesome. Thank you. And Anne says, Ty's just announced teachers pay teacher resources for free. Is that what that's what I think of TPT. But yeah, and I go back to the Thai Center so much because they have so many great resources. Like for planning time, they have this system of 5, what is it, 5, 10, 15, 30 or something. So if the general ed teacher and the special ed teacher only have 5 minutes to plan, what are the most important things that you want to get talked about in that 5 minutes? And they have this whole structure that really makes a big difference. And I know time for teachers and paras to collaborate is very limited during the school day. And so I would really encourage you, if that's like a concern in your building, to go to the Thai Center and look that up. But they have so many great articles. Like they have an article about just because your child is, on these extended learning outcomes does not mean that they have to be in a special ed room. And I've had that come up so many times with families that I've worked with that, if you're going to be on the extended learning outcomes, you're going to be tracked and now you're going to be in the special ed class. So there's great, tremendous articles. The National Down Syndrome Congress has been a partner with the TIE Center, so they've contributed a lot to the research. The other favorite one of mine is Eric Carter, and there was somebody else that worked with him, and it was the 10 Dimensions of Belonging. Have you seen that one from the TIE Center? So yeah, I'll just probably in the newsletter, I'll have a running list of my favorite resources. And like I said, they're not going away. Those resources will still be there, but the TIE Center won't have that funding from OSEP to do all the work that they do. So yeah, I'm gonna see. I should call our special ed state director and say, want to work with the TIE Center? So we are a little bit past the top of the hour. I appreciate you being here. If you are in our Trailblazer group, we have a after the show that's coming up in about 10 minutes. So hopefully Anne and Abby and some of you that are Trailblazer members can join us for our after the show. We are here on Thursdays at noon Mountain Time. I am very honored that you took your time to be with us today, and we are going to keep on keeping on, and we are making collaborative advocacy work so we can make that systemic change. So until next Thursday, I will see you then. Take care. And we will end with our music.